Hi, everyone. So I was looking for that eyeball video I mentioned earlier, but I was unable to find it. So I'm just going to remake it. So anyway, I'm in here in ZBrush, and they actually have a fairly straightforward way of making eyeballs, which I think work pretty well. So let me kind of bring up a photo of eyeball anatomy. So the way that I look at making an eyeball is you're going to have essentially a sphere, okay? And then on the inside of the eyeball, you're going to have this kind of flat area, which is going to be, I believe, your iris. Your cornea is going to be this lens that sits on top of it. And then you're going to have basically your pupil, which is going to be the hollow part behind it. Now, there's more to, obviously this diagram than what we're going to be modeling, but it's going to be fairly simple. Again, it's going to be a sphere that's going to have a slight concave portion to it. And while that's not necessarily anatomically accurate, at least it will be flattened a bit and kind of come in just a little bit. And that'll help us kind of get some of the shadowing that we want to see on that eyeball. But at the very least, it will be flattened a bit more. As for the lens, that can literally just be another sphere that we make clear when you get into texturing and shading that character. But the important part is getting the shape of the eyeball set up so we can kind of work on it from there. Okay. So let's go and get started. So I'm not going to be starting off with a cube or a cylinder. I'm going to be starting off with a sphere, just like that. Make Polymesh 3D. And what I want to do, I'm going to go and turn on symmetry. And I'm going to go ahead and basically mask off the top portion of this. I'm going to invert that. I'm going to hit my move tool. I'm going to hit this little arrow right here. It's going to put it in the center of the unmasked portion. And then I'm going to essentially flatten it out. See right there how it flattens? Oops. Just like that. I'm going to bring that down so it flattens the entire surface, okay? I'm actually going to turn off symmetry. I want this to be in the center right here. You'll see kind of what happens. We can look at the look at this area here. I'm going to shrink it. So you see we're going to get this ring of faces. And then I'm going to bring it down and in, okay? So that's basically the eyeball shape right there, okay? Pretty easy. Now we need to cut a hole so we can have a pupil, okay? Since if you look at an actual photo of an eyeball, bring up a photo. The dark area basically is a hole in the iris where the light travels through and it hits the rods and cones on the back of our eye so we can actually see. That's a good illustration right there. So I need to make a little hole, okay? We could do it with ballooning, which would be pretty easy. We could literally just take a cylinder, stick it in, and boom, make a cone right there, or make a hole right there. I do want to show you just a little bit of a different way of doing it with a tool we haven't talked about yet. And so that's going to be using what's called ZModeler. ZModeler is a really interesting tool. It's basically doing polygonal modeling inside of ZBrush. And it works on having basically stuff that you can do like on a face or on an edge or on a vertex. And so if you right click using ZModeler, you can actually right click on a face and you'll see all these different tools, okay? And it breaks down as what do you want to do? So if you want to Bevel, if you want to add to a curve, you want to delete it, save, and put the word face in front of this since we selected a face. Do you want to bevel a face? Do you want to bridge a face? Do you want to, we have Q-mesh selected, which is kind of neat, which is basically extruding, but it actually will snap to other faces. Do you want to do a regular extrude? So you have all these different tool sets that you can add. Then it's going to ask you, how do you want to do it? Do you want to do it just on single poly? Do you want to do it on an island? So basically like a group of faces, a poly loop. So basically like a face loop that goes around the faces. So let me actually click poly loop and I'll show you what that does. So depending on the direction that I select, you'll see a little line kind of pop up. If I click and drag, you'll see that I can kind of extrude out. It's actually, it's a, like I said, it's a neat tool, okay? And a lot of this interacts with polygroups. And so right now this is all one color, meaning it's all on one polygroup. But what we can do, because I want, again, like I said, I want to punch a hole into the iris. And so we can have a pupil, is I can actually basically shove all of these faces down at once, which is pretty nifty. We can also delete edges if we want to simplify things. And yeah, so let's kind of work on that. So I'm going to simplify this. I'm going to go to edge, see how the edge is highlighted, it's in white, right click, and right now set on insert, meaning I can insert edges. But if I want to delete, I can do delete. I can do a single edge, edge loop complete, or edge loop partial. I want to do edge loop complete. So I can go through and delete a bunch of these edge loops because I'm not really going to need them. I just need to get rid of these. Okay. So now I just got basically a big point right here. Okay. So what I can do is I want to basically punch this group down. Easiest way I can do it is I'm going to go to the edge, right click, and I'm going to go to bevel, edge loop complete. And by the way, this is a lot easier in my opinion if you're using a mouse versus a tablet. This is one of the few times in ZBrush where I believe that using a mouse makes things a little bit easier. You're just a little bit steadier. At least my hand is a little bit steadier. So what we did is we brought in a new edge loop. You'll see the new green color. That means it's a poly group. And we've actually broken this poly group away from this poly group. So they have a green belt around them that's separating them. So that gives us something we can work with here. I'm going to go to right click on a face, go to extrude, and instead of a single poly, I'm going to go to poly groups. So I have a bunch of options here. Poly group island. It's an island because it's not connected to anything else. Okay. Now if I click and drag and move it down, you see I can move this down and move it around, which is kind of cool. Can maybe round this out just a little bit. So just curve it, see? And then maybe I want to insert a single edge loop right here, just like that. And what I'm going to do is actually extrude, go to right click, extrude, poly loop. See how the arrow, see how the line's pointing up like this? That means I don't want to extrude that way. I want to extrude this way. So I want to have that lip is what I'm going for. See, I'm just going to extrude it in just like that. I'm going to bevel this right here, just like that. I'm going to very gently just bevel that area right there. And then I want to add a bunch of edge loops basically around this ring, because I'm going to be subdividing this and I'd like to have some faces to kind of support it. So I'm going to do multiple edge loops. Actually, let me back up and show you. So insert multiple edge loops right here. And I can have either a specified number or I can do interactive, however many I want to put in. So that's kind of cool. It can also alternate polygroups, or you can do the same polygroup. Or you can tell it to keep the polygroup you're pulling it on. I like the interactive. I think that it's kind of fun and you can kind of control how much you want to put in. So I'm going to put it right there just like that. And that is that's basically the finished product. Now, why did I do it like this instead of ballooning? One big reason is when we're getting to rigging, we're making these characters with the expectation that we will rig these characters, okay? And one of the things that we could do when we're rigging a character is we could, say, set up the iris to contract or expand whenever a character is, emoting. So it's important to have good topology on all of our meshes. So if I can set this thing up to have good topology before, I'm sculpting it or whatever, then I will do that. Otherwise, I don't have to go back in and retopologize it. Makes it a little bit easier on my part. So I'm just saving myself a little bit of work by taking a few minutes and setting this guy up properly. Okay. So if you want to get into some of the sculpting, you see here we have a lot of like little wrinkles and details and things like that inside of the eye that we can kind of add in. And if you take the color away, it's really just like basically muscle tissue that's been kind of pulling and stretching and tearing. And that's essentially where all the detail in our eyeball comes from. A kind of a simplified way of going about it would be if we go ahead and just divide it. So I'm going to divide it a couple of times. So up to about 2 million faces. And I'm going to turn on radial symmetry. Okay, radial symmetry is different than bilateral symmetry. I'm going to go under transform, activate symmetry, and click radial. Okay, that's going to put me multiple points around the eye, which is kind of cool. I don't need it going that direction. I'm going to change it to go in the Y direction. So you'll see kind of where I'm going with this now. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a brush. And there's a few brushes on here you can use. I mean, honestly, any of these brushes you can sculpt with if you want to. It's up to you, however you want to get some of this detail. I will say pen and rake, R-A-K-E, are pretty useful. So let me show you the rake brush right there. Since I'm using a mouse, this isn't going to look as good, but you'll get the idea. So I'm going to go radial count, pull that up to like 28. I'm going to go under brush, auto masking, because I definitely don't want to sculpt under the underside of this. Backface mask. And you can kind of see how you immediately start sculpting at that point. Turn this down. Kind of starts to add some interesting detail. So you can see you're kind of adding some movement. And you're keeping that really on the inside of the iris. You're not going to be putting a lot of that detail on the outside. It's pretty smooth outside of that iris. Let's get a pen shadow brush right here. Want to turn off RGB, turn on Z add. You can kind of start branching some of that detail out. There you go. That is that's an eyeball. Like I had mentioned before with the lens, very, very simply, you could take another sphere and just honestly just use that. I might suggest actually go under geometry. Make sure I got the right one selected. Yep, there we go. And right here, if it smooths in Maya, it might actually pinch a little bit because of that pole. What I might suggest is under geometry, do a Z remesh. So it gets rid of that pole. And then just make it just very slightly a little bit bigger. And then I want to use a move brush. Just a very lightly kind of move this forward. So we're getting kind of that bubble shape, that little dip shape that we're looking at. See, just like that. So you could do that if you wanted to. And those would be your two meshes for the thing. So I think that's a pretty simple approach to creating an eyeball. You know, use it however you want. If you enjoy it, hope you do. Let me know if it works out for you.